you the question as to, taking a cue also from the title of the festival, is that when did you encounter the essay form, so to say, or when did, or to rephrase in simple words, when did you start thinking of sort of playing with the film form and being unconventional in terms of form? So maybe we can begin there.
Okay, so for me, those are two separate questions. Okay, so when did I start thinking of film as an unconventional form is for me question one, and the essay form is a second question. So I would say, okay, very quickly, I saw a few films by people like Antonioni and Satyajit Ray and people when I was 17 or 18 and decided I wanted to be a filmmaker. Then I managed to get a scholarship to go to a small college in America, which had a very good visual arts department. When I applied, they had a film department. When I got there, the film department had shut down. So I had a choice to leave the college and come back to India or stay on and study what they had. And I was lucky that I decided to stay on because their visual arts departments basically helped me break through the barriers of, like, I used to think painting was in one place, photography was in one place, and cinema was in one place, and in cinema, documentary and fiction film. I didn't think of other forms at that point. And from there it began that, basically it's about what you want to express and then finding the medium and the correct mix of mediums even to express it. So that lesson was learned early, but finished my studies in America, decided not to continue, and I came back to India to work with Ketan Mehta, assisting him on his second feature film. I'd seen Bhavni Bhavai in New York, and I decided that this was great, and I wanted to get back to India and work in India rather than in New York. So
This
basically,
was a Mirch Masala. Was this Mirch Masala?
no, this was Holi.
Holy, okay.
Holi. So, and Ketan's parents and my parents were close friends, so I knew them. So I joined Ketan, which was quite interesting and also chaotic because money was scarce and he was trying to organize the whole thing around Holi. And it would end up being shot on the FTII campus with a lot of people who are now very famous, working as young actors and young directors and cameramen, etc. For example, Amir Khan was Amir Hussain, uh, Asutosh Golwalkar was acting in it, and there was Zuchi was there. Paddy Padmanabhan, who's just passed away, was handling all the sound stuff. Jahangir Chaudhary was doing the camera. Anil Mehta was one of the chief assistants, and so on and so forth. So I worked with Ketan and that team for 2 or 3 years, and then basically we came to the conclusion that being an assistant director was not my uh, strong point, so to speak. I needed to do my own stuff for whatever it was worth. I'd started to make a film on the new market in Calcutta. Those who know Calcutta, it's an old Victorian market in the center of town. So using that as a kind of a metaphor for colonialism, etc., whatever. I was 24 years old. So I made that film. That was my first film. It has now disappeared, as celluloid tends to do if you don't take care of it. And then I was seeing other people's films, but I wasn't particularly paying attention to the essay form. Uh, but I was very getting to know some Baul singers and Baul musicians and people working with them. So I started shooting what I thought would be a short documentary, and it would be a 2-day shoot in 1988. There was a Baul festival, Mela. First there was a gathering, and then there was a performance on the second day. And I thought it'd make a short film. But the material we got, and we shot on 16, and the material we got on those 2 days immediately demanded that we actually explore further and get into making a longer film on the Bowls. And I'd seen the film by Georges Luneau, which was a classic attempt at a fly on the wall documentary that he had made in 1978. And while there were some fantastic sequences, in there, but overall, I wasn't happy with that film. I thought I could do better. but doing better also meant doing different because as I got into the whole process, me and my cameraman and sound recordist, Ranjan Palit, Mahadev Shi, others, we realized that entering into a completely different environment in terms of culture, class, geography, meant that we had to be kind of attentive also to ourselves and place ourselves. We couldn't just pretend not to exist. And recently I saw a documentary. Sorry, I'm just digressing a bit, perhaps, but I saw a documentary made about, you know, a couple who had left the uh, sort of Chhattisgarh area, uh, whatever so-called Maoist area, and they moved into another part of Maharashtra. And the film was like almost shot like a fiction film. You know, it was almost like they had perfect dialogues, perfect lighting at night in their hut. The situations were always just so. And I was wondering how in a documentary do you do that? Because that's not how it works when you have a camera and tape recorder in a situation where you're an outsider. So we were dealing with this stuff, and as we were dealing with this stuff, uh, 11 Miles became a self-reflexive film as well. While engaging in a dialogue with the Bowles, it was also engaging with the process of filmmaking, with what we wanted to do and what was actually happening, and the clash and dialogue between that stuff. So willy-nilly, one stumbled onto the essay form, I would say. Uh, and then the second film that I made was something which was kind of like a poetic short film called Memories of Milk City, which was shown in Experimenta, I think now,
Last
not
year, I think.
last year. Yeah, exactly. So that was a short film on Ahmedabad. Again, not a straight documentary, but more like a meditative, poetic essay, whatever. So these films I'd already done, and then I saw, while preparing for Tales from Planet Kolkata, I saw Sans Soleil by Chris Marker. And then I made Tales from Planet Kolkata, and even then I'd not seen one of the greatest essay filmmakers of them all, which is Harun Farooqi. And in fact, I'm sitting in his study, and those are his archival shelves behind me. So I met him much later, Harun, and became friends with him and got to know his work. And then, of course, we lost him 10 years ago, far too early. But I know that had I seen those films, I'd have been influenced again by them as well, which I now am happy to be influenced by when I go back to filmmaking. So, and there's many different kinds of essay filmmaking, I suppose. So for me, the short answer is I stumbled onto it, but took a long route to that answer.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I mean, we also had just couple of weeks back, we had Harun Farooqui retrospective in Bangalore. So
Right.
hopefully some of the audience, and I got a chance to speak at that retrospective also. So I'm a big Farooqui fan for your information. Yeah. So okay, now I mean, of course, we should also thank Arsenal for restoring your films and also three of
I
your
thank
films.
them too. Huh.
Yeah, three of your films and also many other Indian filmmakers like
Deepa's films,
Deepa's films, yeah, Yuganthar
and
many
forthcoming is
others.
Badnaam Basti.
Yes, Badnaam Basti too. Yeah, yeah, and I was very lucky to read your essay and your story of your first two films, which we never get to see or in future as well because they were lost it. But in the book that Shai edited, you wrote an
Yeah,
essay
yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
the film on New Market that you just mentioned. Okay, coming to Tales of Planet Kolkata, I mean, of course, there is a very central idea carrying the film in terms of critiquing the representation or visual representation of Calcutta in cinema by the West, mostly Western cinema, right? And both fiction and non-fiction you look at, since you look at Louis Malle as well as City of Joy.
Yeah.
But in terms of form, there are so many things you bring together. As in, there are staged, performed sequences of you performing as well, and then Tony performing as well, and then of course there is the
Paritosh is also
organ
performing the poem, and
Paritosh.
Loic
Yeah,
is performing the white man with fever, the beginning
correct.
out of
Yeah,
Apocalypse Now.
and the Patchitra artist too is performing,
Yes.
right? Yeah, So and you have then also some archival footage of behind the scenes of City of Joy, and then of the Granada program on TV. So all this you're bringing together. So how did I mean, the question really is that how do you bring together so many different styles of footages into this narrative, right? So this film of yours, right? So how
Right.
do you do that, right? And what is and how do you make those choices? I think we're trying to get into that artistic choice,
Right.
right?
So the main thing I realize now when I look back at it is that because I got lucky enough to meet, say, a commissioning editor like Alan Fountain, who has also passed away, sadly. He was in charge of Channel 4's film and video experimental commissioning. So normally, we Indian documentary filmmakers would go to Farooq Dhondi, who was in charge of the Caribbean and South Asian programming. And Farooq, a great guy, a lot of sense of humor, very intelligent, but fairly straight-laced in his choices of structure, form, what he liked, what he didn't like. So he would look at something like Hansworth's Songs, which was a film made by the Black Audio Collective, I think in 1982, 83, and Salman Rushdie gave it a slam. And now, if you look at the work of Isaac Julian or his colleagues in that collective, their work is highly regarded. But at that point, it was just seen as weird, outlier. You know, why are these people wasting precious opportunities given to Black and Asian filmmakers and doing this experimental nonsense, whereas they could be doing straight, hard-hitting, issue-based documentaries kind of thing. So, I mean, Alan was much more open and sort of receptive to different kinds. His job was to be receptive to different kinds of films. So luckily, I happened to connect with him. So he supported 11 Miles, and then the initiative called South funded both Memories of Milk City and Tales from Planet Kolkata. So Memories of Milk City was what I call sketches for a film for Ahmedabad. It's a short film, and it was literally done like a sketch notebook for me, because I do also come from a visual art painting, drawing kind of practice, where you start drawing or painting, not quite knowing what you're doing, and then something coalesces, something becomes like a curd from the mess, and then it forms, you know. And so 11 Miles was, we took a long time to arrive at the form. After many mistakes, many going forward and saying, no, not this, come back. Tales from Planet Kolkata, I was lucky. I started with a canvas where I knew that I had a lot of freedom to experiment and do what I want, and the budget was reasonable as well. So I started collaborating with a guy called Shamal Sengupta, who's a scriptwriter, filmmaker based in Calcutta, and we actually had a number of staged, performative, semi-fiction stories around Calcutta, and the whole essay film was supposed to be woven by those th those small fictional scenes. Most of them got dropped, and the only one that stayed was the Apocalypse Now scene. Because I got back to India, and this was November '92, and the Babri Masjid thing was exploding, and all kinds of stuff was going on. And I was trying to make this film about Calcutta in the middle of all that. And then my teacher and friend Deepak Majumdar, who had been central to 11 Miles, he died in the middle of my making Planet Kolkata. So that also brought a different focus about the things that he had taught us, the things that he was concerned about. So it became like partly a letter to him, or an address to him, like a phone call or yeah, conversation with this man who's just off the screen, just outside life kind of feeling. So and Tony Cox and I had got to know each other in Vermont in college, and he was also came from a very, very strong experimental practice. And if you can find his work, I urge people in the audience to check it out, because he is now recognized as a major video artist, and his work with text and image and music and sound is particular and very, 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 very specific, very unique. But his work was starting off at that point as well. So we were all interested in uh, the shift and discrepancies between what could happen with different kinds of image, different kinds of sound, and different kinds of text. That was also very important always. Uh, so the film got stitched together. So there was an initial idea of a script and an initial idea that we would address the whole business. For example, I knew that I would have Dilip Verma's footage of City of Joy, which I had assisted Dilip in shooting. I had done the interviews for that. So I knew what footage existed and what that process had been like. Uh, and So then you actually begin to put the film together, not before you start shooting, but during the shoot. So between shooting days, I would say, okay, this is working, this is working, this is not working. How about this? How about this? And then uh, that's how the film was kind of stitched together. It was a luxurious way of doing it at that time, especially in 16 millimeter, because normally people don't have the budget or the time. And again, today, if you go to commissioning editors, if you go to these doc edge kind of things, you will find mentors and you will find people who are trying to basically, like Olympians are trained to do it in the shortest time possible or the longest length possible. They're trying to make compelling narratives, but in a very narrow aesthetic, in a very narrow kind of acceptable form, a range of forms. And at that time was almost the opposite of it. It was like acceptable to really take off, freak out, experiment, do what you wanted. And hopefully it has to hold together. You can't just throw paint at a canvas and hope it works. It isn't quite like that. But so again, one stumbled onto a particular kind of nonfiction, essayistic, non-documentary form.
Yeah, and it's also in a way it stays true to the essay form in the sense that your own personality also seeps in, especially the irreverence, right? We get to see even while you're filming, there is a certain irreverence to say a car passing by. You don't want to reshoot that part where Tony is saying something, and in a
The taxi
conventional
goes by, yeah.
yeah, the taxi goes by. Conventional filmmaking would have say cut, 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 फिर से करते हैं. That is not happening here, right? There is it's a lot of such irreverent movements which are very much coming from your own personality, as we all know, right? So, so that's great. I also wanted just one last question before we open it for everyone. Um,
Yeah,
in this form, I think what becomes the most crucial part of the filmmaking process is the montage, right? How do we construct the montage? Because there
hmm,
is no narrative driving the sequencing of image or sound or anything, right? So there can be, I mean, your own film can be resequenced in a very different way as well.
sure.
So how, yeah, so montage becomes the most crucial part, I would say. So if you agree with this, I just want to ask you in the sense that what is your approach to this idea of the montage in your films? Because many times the images are probably they 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 might be related aesthetically, they might be many times they are not really uh, have a direct connection that how has some it with direct connection like narrative films might have, right?
I mean, there's a different narrative that's coming into place. So again, all the three different films I would refer to, well, 11 Miles took 3 years to make. So one was doing things like shooting, making a rough cut of some sequences, then going out and shooting again, and then making a rough cut of that and the previous rough cut, joining, seeing how parts were working out. In the meantime, the Bowls' lives were not under our control, obviously, or under any script. So they were developing, so we were also trying to catch that. And then at the end of it, when we thought, okay, we have enough, I sat down and wrote the overarching script, which controls the montage of that film. Uh, Memories of Milk City, the proposal of it was basically I want to look at consumption and food obsession on this one gully. It's called Cow Gully in Ahmedabad near Law College Gardens. And, that was the basic idea that I pitched to them. But when I got to Ahmedabad, it was like the old force, the new colonies, the new houses, and this beautiful house by a man called Kaun, not Khan, which Amit Ambalal's bungalow, which is one of beautiful aesthetics and pitchwise and all that, plus the brash, tube lit food stalls, all that kind of, and the Garba season, all of that clashed and came together. But it was done very quickly with the Gujarati writer Madhu Rai. I was taking excerpts from his nonsense play that he had written in 1969 after the Hindu Muslim riots, but I'd also asked him to do a separate text about Ahmedabad for the film. And I ran both those texts together. And so, in a sense, that controlled the edit. But I mean, just to give you an example of how things would work, uh, I had a really long shot where there is uh, this kind of place where all these cows are kept in the middle of old Ahmedabad, right in the middle of a Muslim area. And those cows would come out in the morning and they would walk through this long procession and spread out around that area and eat and do graze all day. And then at night, they would all come back. And someone told me about this. So I went and set the camera up with Ranjan Palit. And I said, let's just do a static frame. And we did the static frame. It was a 10-minute shot. So first one cow comes out, two cows come out, and then a whole bunch of them. And they keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. And at the end, there is a short pan which shows where the cows are going. Uh, and it was the first time I was working with Reena Mohan as an editor. And Reena's a very cut to the chase kind of personality. So she doesn't have, I mean, she's very, very open to experimenting, but she also doesn't like woolly headedness. So she said, Ruchir, your film is supposed to be 10 minutes long. This shot is 9 minutes long. What do you want to do? Is this your film? So I said, no, this is not my film. We need to have other things in it as well. Can we play with jump cuts maybe? So she says, okay, yes, go away, go out. I'll work on something and you come back. So I went out. When I came back, she had kind of cut this beautiful sequence together, uh, compacting that 10-minute shot into like, I think a minute and a half or something, which is, and so we were playing with that film also during the montage, right? Then she did it again with the pav bhaji making sequence. So then that became like a recurring motif of jump cuts of a certain kind with the camera static through that film. And again, Reena edited Tales from Planet Kolkata. And but for that edit, I had a pretty clear script. And then some sequences we played around with to see what would go with what. And some sequences, it was very clear. Like I knew that there would be the American radio voice and the French voice on that car junkyard. With Tony's piece that he had written, I knew that I would be working through the old building, and then I just wanted one continuous shot of this rickshaw puller, so we think, pulling the rickshaw and then stopping and then turning around, and it turns out it's actually not a rickshaw puller at all, but a black American man speaking to camera with a certain amount of very lucid anger. So, and then there were other things that we put together as the film went on. So, like that.
Yeah, I mean, and there is of course a lot of referencing. Even I think elsewhere you have spoken about how even how the shots were taken were inspired by sometimes by Ghatak's films or by Ray's films in the
Ray,
movies.
Ghatak, Antonioni, Godard, yeah,
Yes. Okay. I think since I've been getting uh, waves here for
signals.
opening, yeah, signals to open up to the audience. So
Sure.
I think if you have any questions, please. Yeah. No one has. I have more questions which I can cover.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful film. I'm just curious to know regarding the sound of helicopter used and also the street player's body floating around, repetitively coming quite often in the film. I mean, would you just elaborate on that?
Sorry, whose body floating around?
Street player's body, basically he's playing on the pole,
He's performing on the pole.
Oh,
performing on
right.
the
Yeah,
pole.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay,
You
so
probably shot for your first film. Yeah,
no, that's Louis Malle.
that's Louis Mal's image.
That's from Louis Malle's Calcutta films, as it says in the credits. So, yes. So the idea was to take the first sequence of Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, which is set in Vietnam. And if anyone has seen, some of you may have seen that film, the first sequence is entirely of this man in a hotel room in Saigon, and he's dreaming of these helicopters and napalm bombs bombing the jungles. And there's a sound of the helicopter, and the music soundtrack has the song "The End" by The Doors. And so instead of having actual helicopter, I saw that image in Louis Malle's film of this bamboo pole performers. You still have them now. And I thought, well, that's a kind of a helicopter. And I got this man to dream. Mm, and we didn't have explosions, but initially the whole sequence was cut to the sound of the Doors, the end. But when we asked them for permission to use the song, they said the cost would be $5,000 a second. So even though I had a really good budget for a 2 minute, 2.5 minute sequence, 3 minutes even maybe, that's a lot of seconds and that's a lot of $5,000. So we couldn't afford it. And I had already spoken to Vikram Joglekar and Dee Wood about doing the kind of music plus sound, actually more sound than music for the film, a different kind of soundtrack. So I spoke to them again and I said, hey, listen, instead of the Doors, we're going to need to have something else to replace the thing. So they worked with a didgeridoo and Jew's harp and other things to do a kind of a nod plus a spoof of the Doors song and of the Coppola soundtrack. So that's how that stuff came around. And the spinning boy on the bamboo is a recurring motif because again, it's archival stuff taken from Louis Malle. So that footage is shot in 1969 or 68 even. And I'm using it again in 1993. Yeah.
Uh, uh, who is Deepak Majumdar? Actually, I went to college in Calcutta and I've heard this name sort of elusive and floating, but uh, exactly is he?
Okay. So uh, Deepak Majumdar is he comes from East Bengal, like many, like Ritvik Ghatak and so many Mrinal Sen, others, all these poets. And he's part of the radical poetry and essay movement in Calcutta. Uh, in the 50s, there are 3 or 4 poetic groups who are all young men who are fiery, radical, who want to overturn Tagore and the Tagore. They love Tagore, but enough of him. We need to talk about our reality, which Tagore never really grappled with. So they were, and the morality of Calcutta, they also wanted to overturn. So they were part of the whole, like 3 or 4 different groups of angry young men generation. They were always men. Women weren't present in those groups at that time. And Deepak is one of those fiery, super intelligent, super talented characters, beautiful control of English and Bengali. And he then gets a Fulbright scholarship and goes to America in the early 60s. And there he meets Allen Ginsberg and Bob, like gets close to Dylan. I don't think he meets Dylan. And he sees all kinds of the whole upheaval of the anti-war movement in America and the Democratic Convention and all these things he's present and witnesses. And he's writing about it for Bengali little magazines, recounting the stuff of what's going on. And he's married. He leaves, divorces his first wife. He meets this American woman called Carol. And he and Carol get married. And instead of coming back to India, they move to Greece. And as soon as they move to Greece, there's the colonel's coup in Greece, which is again against the leftist government. And he witnesses that. And then they start making their journeys back to India overland from Greece and from Europe. And they finally move back to Calcutta around 1975-76, where Gaston Roberge, Father Gaston Roberge, has just started this institution called Chitrabani. And Chitrabani is a media studies, media experimentation, media production organization under the aegis of the Jesuits and the Catholic Church. But again, Roberge is a very unique man. He's gone to UCLA, studied film studies, and come back. He loves Satyajit Ray, but he also sees the importance of a film like Sholay. So he's writing articles and doing film work around that and teaching at FTII and NID and other places. And he hires Deepak to run the media studies diploma program, which is where I come in contact with him. The artist Shiba Chachi, who is also my, in her teens at that time, she comes into contact with him. Vivek Benegal, who is a senior doctor now at Nimhans, comes into contact with him. Gautam Chatterjee, who of Mohinir Ghoraguli, and also a filmmaker who dies very young, also comes into contact with Deepak. So Deepak teaches and influences a whole bunch of diverse people of varying from the age of 30, 32 down to someone like me who's a 17-year-old, 18-year-old. And so one looks up to him, we learn a lot from him, but he's also the kind of person who invites argument. And for those of us who got close to him, he became a friend as well as a teacher. So, and he's the one who says to everyone, like, stop just staying in your own bubble. Look at in Bengal's traditions of the Bahurupiyas, of the Potachitra, the Bauls. And he starts taking groups of students into the Baul milieu. And he works with George Luno on that first film. And it's through him that I get to know the Bauls. So in 11 Miles, the film on the Bauls, there are interviews with Deepak on the boat in the middle of the river where he's elliptically stitching together stuff without telling you, giving you a primer about the Bauls. He's getting you to think about stuff. So some of the footage that you see in Tales from Planet Kolkata is actually me reshooting my own film on television and cutting it so that Deepak is chopped off, but you can see his hand or his foot or the river or whatever as a kind of, shattered presence. So that's Deepak. And he writes very beautifully, lots of essays and things. He's now, some of the stuff has been collected into books and stuff, so, but not much translated from Bangla to English yet.
Yeah, hi Ruchir. Yeah, thank you
Hi.
for the film. Just a question on the aspect of myth, because you are actively deconstructing the myth of Calcutta built through City of Joy and Louis Malle and so on. But also, were you also kind of constructing an alternative myth, because in that bar scene you get a sense that if Calcutta is not the city of joy, it's the city of abjection, the complete opposite.
Yeah.
Was there a kind of a sense of constructing an alternate myth, or probably working against that? And the other question is, how did you nail that French accent?
How did they nail the French accent? You didn't ask me about my American accent, okay? Yeah, so the idea was to deconstruct the myth. Now, when you speak to someone like Gaston Roberge, he would say Calcutta has three icons. One of them is Satyajit Ray, the other is the rickshawala, and the third is Mother Teresa. So He, of course, revered Mother Teresa. I didn't. I don't. And the rickshawala. So I kind of, you see a nod to all three of these icons in the film. And at the same time, Louis Malle is totally fascinated by Kali and by the poverty in Calcutta and the beauty and how his camera becomes an impossible camera and all this stuff. So, yeah, and it's also not just the films, it's also books like Geoffrey Boras's Calcutta or uh, Dominique Lapierre, who actually writes the original book for City of Joy, which is actually a slum called Anandanagar, if you know, which people don't realize that City of Joy means is a literal translation of the Anandanagar slum colony, whatever. So, so okay, it's weird now because at that time it was really annoying how Calcutta was always put as the black hole of the world. That stopped somewhere around 1995, 96, and whatever. By 2000, it was over. And Calcutta was so boring that it was neither the worst city in the world nor anything good. Now we are much better, actually, but at the moment we are not. Again, we are like in a very dark place if you've been following the news. So, yeah, the idea was to deconstruct the myth and maybe indicate and allude towards possible alternative myths, but also saying that those are also myths. You know, there's the self myth of this Oboni Bariacho, which is a famous poem. Now, what is it? It's this knock on the door at night with the clouds gathering in the sky and rain coming down. And it's about alienation and isolation and a great kind of self-flagellating sadness. So I'm kind of alluding to that, but I'm also kind of questioning that is that only thing that we are? And then the Pasolini poem also talks about a desperate vitality. So that desperate vitality is basically the only thing that I would say I would attach to Calcutta, that whatever it is a desperate vitality in corners of the city that defines the city for me, at least at that time. Now I would probably have a different thing to say about it. So yeah, I'm saying basically that people create myths about any city. Outsiders create one set of myths, insiders create another set of myths. People who are visiting and staying for a bit and going away create a third set of myths. And let's examine this whole process, I would say. How did I nail the French accent? Well, I was doing it as a spoof and people were laughing and stuff. And then I thought, why not bring in proper spoof into the whole business? Because all these filmmakers come and all these intellectuals, French love Calcutta, the Brits love Calcutta, Americans love Calcutta, so Germans love Calcutta. Good, I'm in Berlin right now. Gunter Grass comes and
Monsieur Joshi, I have a
yeah.
question. There is a shot in your film where where I see how you say that rickshaw puller. He's wearing
Yes,
a
yes.
singlet, some like a singlet, and there is a Tamil written on it. I want to know if you shot it in the Lake Market area, and if what that inscription in Tamil says.
I have no idea what the inscription in Tamil is. In fact, I saw it. I thought, let me figure out what this is after all this time. And as it happens, Tony Coates is also visiting Berlin at this point. So, yeah, the singlet was just something we picked up from someone, and it was a really filthy singlet. It is indeed in the Lake Market area. You're absolutely right. It's on Jatin Das Road. So, perfect.
Merci.
Okay, correct. Excellent. We all do it.
Thank you.
There's this girl on Insta. Has anyone seen how she does accents? She's also from South India. And I think one of,
From Pondicherry, I think, no?
I think, yeah, her favorite is
Yeah.
also, but that's young people's French. I don't speak it.
Yeah.
You know, this whole different vocabulary. Yeah.
Okay, on that note, thank you, Ruchir, for joining us and for
No,
allowing us
thank
to
you all for coming and thank you for giving me such an intelligent and happy, positive response to the film. Very grateful to all of you at Vikalp, Sandhya, everyone. And yeah, thank you.
hopefully see you soon again in another of your
Yes,
screenings.
hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Ruchir.
Bye, Ruchir.
Bye.
Right. Bye.
And thank you to Sandhya and Gautam for curating this wonderful festival. Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone and good night. We'll see you back 10:30 tomorrow morning. I really want to thank Bas